health care, so we don't have to pay for it. Yeah, right. You don't have to pay for it. It's free. Really. What else are we asking for? We're asking for everything. We're asking for all these different entitlements. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all these different welfare entitlements and so forth, apathy to dependence, and then once we get to that state, democracy is almost over. We're going to go back into bondage. On average, throughout history, the cycle of democracy that I just explained has lasted about 200 years. Okay, when did our country start? 1776. 200 years after that is 1976. You know what? We are pushing the envelope on our freedoms. That's a scary thought to me. It's a very scary thought because we are at the end of a democratic cycle in this country. And remember the original definition, the majority always vote for the candidates who promise the most benefits from the public treasury. We don't even need to end at that anymore because we can go beyond the public treasury. We don't have to stop at tax revenues. We can go to the Federal Reserve and they can print money like there's no tomorrow, and they have. We have $13 trillion worth of debt. What is that? That is the accumulation of year after year after year after year of deficit spending. Now it's all accumulated to $13 trillion. By the end of next year, at minimum, it's going to be $14.6 trillion. Just because that's what President Obama's proposed budget is, $1.6 trillion over what we bring in tax revenues. And see, even that's a bogus number. Because the tax revenues, the Congressional Budget Office is assuming that we are going to continue spending money. They are assuming that we are going to have economic growth. They are assuming that tax revenues are going to continue to increase. Those are some very faulty assumptions, and we're going to go over why they're such faulty assumptions. So, that is where we are going to start today. Because that's where we are in this nation. We are on, I see that we are on stage 7 of 8 of the cycle of democracy. And Thomas Jefferson, one of my very favorite founding fathers, has some great quotes, and I want to go over some of them. First one is, "My reading of history convinces me that most bad government results from too much government." Man, these guys were smart. Way smarter than we are. That's why I lean on their writing so much for wisdom. You know, wisdom to navigate these uncertain times that we're living in. But not only was Thomas Jefferson a political philosopher, he was an economic philosopher. Listen to some of these quotes that he has about economics. "If the debt should be swelled to a formidable size, we shall be committed to the career of debt, corruption, and rottenness. The discharge of debt, therefore, is vital to the destinies of our government." What was he saying? Yeah, it's probably inevitable the governments are going to amass a lot of debt, so how does our government succeed? We have to get rid of it. That's what he's saying there. Secondly, "I am not among those who fear the people, and to preserve their independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make our election between frugality and liberty, or excess spending and servitude. If we run into such debts as that we must be taxed in our meat and our drink, in our necessaries and our comforts, in our labors and our amusements, for our callings and our creeds, our people must come to labor 16 hours in 24 and give the earnings of 15 of those hours to the government for their debts and daily expenses. And that 1 hour that's left is insufficient to afford us bread. The forerunner of all of this tax nonsense," this is my paraphrase right here, actually I'll just read his. "The forerunner of all this public debt, taxation that follows, and in its train, wretchedness and oppression." What is he saying there? After you have all this taxation, the taxation that comes from too much public debt, the following this is wretchedness and oppression. Where are we today? I can see the writing on the wall. It's not a matter of if anymore, it's a matter of when. That train has left the station. That then he says, probably the wisest thing that he said, "With the respect to future debt, would it not be wise and just for that nation to declare in the Constitution they are forming that neither the legislature nor the nation itself can validly contract more debt than they may pay within their own age or within the term of 19 years. He said, you know what, you can pass debt legislation into existence, but just make sure that this generation can pay it off. Make sure that we can pay it off within 19 years. See, back then when he wrote that, people didn't live very long. So 19 years was basically the rest of their generation. So $13 trillion, is there any way that my kids' generation, or my generation, we're the generation writing all this nonsense, can we pay it off? No. Can my kids? No. Can the generation that follows them? No. We're at the point of no return. We can't pay off that debt. It's almost, not quite, but almost to the point of being mathematically impossible to ever repay our debt. So what are the options? Well, you could try, but if it's mathematically almost impossible, why even try? So the second one is to print your way out of it, which I think is what they're doing. Or the third, most horrible option is just just walk away from it. Like what most of us do. You know, when we get too much debt, we file bankruptcy, we can just walk away from it. However, if the biggest debtor nation in the world walks away from their debt, what are the consequences? All-out war. We're going to have so many people across the world so ticked off at us, it will just create a war. So really, the only option that they have is to print money. And print like there is no tomorrow. And that's exactly what they're doing, to the tune of well over $100 billion a month. They are creating money out of thin air. So let's look at some of this current economic news that we're looking at. You know, that's some quotes from our founding fathers, the secular democracy. I mean, this is kind of gloom and doom, but don't think that this is going to end in gloom and doom. I do have a message of hope here at the end. And this isn't going to be this way for the whole speech. In 2010, the U.S. government is projected to issue almost as much new debt as the rest of the governments of the world combined. Yeah, this year, the U.S. government is projected to issue almost as much new debt as the rest of the governments of the world combined. All of them added together. It's ridiculous. That's insane. The budget, we already went over, the budget deficit of approximately $1.6 trillion in 2010. Okay, government debt is now up to 90% of the gross domestic product. Okay, this is a weird number because you see a wide range of numbers. Technically, it's 93% right now. That's just government debt. Is the government the only entity that has debt in our country? No, consumers have debt. Municipal governments have debt. State governments have debt. The federal government obviously has debt, 93% of gross domestic product. But so do corporations. When you add up all of that debt, we're at about 400% of our GDP is debt. What was Greece? When Greece got downgraded to junk bond status, and we're seeing what's happening in Greece right now as we speak, 300%. We're technically 33% worse off than Greece. And look what happened to Greece. Why is it that we are not in the same predicament that Greece is? There is an answer to this. Why? Well, we do have a printing press. The answer is because we're still the world's reserve currency. What that means is that all international settlements, all international transactions across the globe are basically dollar denominated. So, if you're Russia and you're buying goods from China, you're not paying in rubles, you're paying in US dollars. If you're Malaysia and you're buying something from Brazil, you're not paying in the Malaysian dinar, you're paying in US dollars. International settlements are done in the world's reserve currency. The world's reserve currency since the Bretton Woods back in the 1940s is the US dollar. That's the only reason there's any demand left for the dollar. And so that's why we haven't fallen into the same exact